Hey y'all, it's your girl Michelle Lenae, and you're tuned in to Christ Over Culture, your place for faith, news, and pop culture. I am so excited because we have a very special guest. We have Mrs. Genora Boykins. She is the co-founder of Maison in Midtown here in Houston, Texas, and she co-founded it with her best friend. They've been operating it for over 10 years now. It's a bed and breakfast specifically. And I'm just so excited because Mrs. Boykins and her friend, Mrs. Sharon Owens, have done something really special in the Houston area. So, Mrs. Boykins, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm sorry that Sharon couldn't join us today.
Yes.
But no, she's here in spirit.
Absolutely. So, Mrs. Boykins, let us know, take us back to how you started with the idea of a hotel. What were those conversations like, and where did that seed get planted?
The seed was planted when we talked about being entrepreneurs. That's really where the seed was planted. I have been involved in community development a long time. Sharon was very involved and engaged in the community as well. And it was more about, let's own a business. There weren't a lot of African American women in business at the time we bought this property in 1999. So as we talked about what we could do, with the thought that, you know, if something happened to our corporate jobs, if we got downsized or right-sized, that we'd have something to fall back on. And as Sharon was preparing for retirement, we were just trying to think about what could we do, what kind of business could we have. And so as we were serving on the downtown management district, which actually is engaged in helping to promote downtown, enhance downtown, encourage people to live and move downtown, one of the big issues was having this huge George R. Brown Convention Center, but no hotels to support it. So you had one or two hotels, but not the number you would need to support big conventions. And so as we were talking, it was like, well, we can't do a hotel. And Sharon was like, what about a bed and breakfast? I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Didn't know anything about bed and breakfasts, never owned one, didn't know anybody that owned one, had never stayed in one.
Wow.
So we really spent a lot of time studying the industry and just learning the industry, learning from others. It's a very open industry. You know, some industries where it's very competitive, people don't like to share information. But the bed and breakfast industry, they're very open, and because your success is their success. And so we just, like I said, I thought we were the longest aspiring innkeepers because we kept going to the conferences year after year after year and just learning as much as we could.
Wow. So you bought the property in 1999. You held on to it for a very long time.
We did.
And so in that process, you were attending conferences, like you hadn't built yet, but you were learning the business is what it sounds like.
Right. Well, just learning the business, learning the travel trends, just learning everything we would need to know. Because at the time when we bought this land in 99, the bed and breakfast industry in Texas was very like a traditional bed and breakfast. Most of them were historical homes that people had either converted or older mansions people had converted. And so when we came on the scene and we were like, hey, we're going to build a bed and breakfast. And we went to the Texas Bed and Breakfast Association. And the people were like, well, who would want to stay at something that's new? You know, because most people were thinking of Victorian style homes, like you see in the Heights here. Things like that were what you would typically find. But we were really right on the cusp of the industry shifting. So in other parts of the United States, people were actually looking to build or to develop something new into a bed and breakfast. So while they weren't necessarily open to the concept at the time, of course, that didn't deter us. I think we were just thinking, I wanted to be a place where I would want to stay. And so that's what we did.
Yeah, so it sounds like the industry is really open. Who were some key mentors to you as you were coming up with the idea and even breaking ground?
I would say that the most influential mentor that we had and have is Monique Greenwood. She owns Aquaba. It's AKWAABA. And she has multiple locations. And she really took us under her wing and just encouraged us. She had maybe, when we first joined the Bed and Breakfast Association, there's a national association. I think at the time she probably had 3 or 4. She has one in Brooklyn. She has, and now one in Philadelphia. So she had one in New Orleans at the time. It did not make it through the hurricane, so she closed that location. But she had multiple locations, and so she was just such a nurturer, just always encouraging, particularly African Americans who wanted to enter the business, to make sure that we, were on track, from everything about, how many rooms are you thinking about having, just helping us kind of think through the processes that we would need to have in place to support the business that we dreamed of having one day. So
yeah, it seems like pivotal to have a mentor to help guide you through that process if you're coming into it for the first time. You mentioned not a lot of African Americans are in the bed and breakfast industry. Do you know how much of a either majority or minority African Americans are, or just kind of even what you've observed?
There are quite a few. We're part of an African American Innkeepers Association as well.
Okay.
So I think there are probably anywhere from 10 to 15 properties that are probably active with the organization, meaning we get together and talk. Sometimes we, during COVID, we would have Zoom discussions on what are the things you're implementing at your place to, be prepared to address guests as they return after COVID. And also to help promote each other. A lot of the ones that are African American owned are on the East Coast, which is an area that there are a lot of bed and breakfasts to begin with. So here in Texas, I think there may be one or two other African American owned inns that I'm aware of. And some just, don't necessarily identify as being African American owned. Sharon and I didn't originally, we've never promoted ourselves as an African American owned bed and breakfast. We just wanted to be a great place to stay, regardless of who the owners were. So
yeah, I understand that. So in terms of startup costs, I know that you worked in corporate America. I know that you have a legal background as an attorney, and I've heard that it's important to have an attorney, to have an accountant, to have certain things in place, to have capital in order to start your own business. So what did that look like for you?
Well, for us, even though I am an attorney, it's just like they tell doctors, don't try to practice on yourself. I don't ever recommend that lawyers try to represent themselves. So we actually, a good friend of ours who is a lawyer and does a lot of corporate type work in helping startup businesses and formation of businesses, helped us along with a CPA who helped us think about the tax implications of whatever structure we decided to use for the business. We wanted to have investors, so we ended up doing a limited partnership. That's what we formed, which would be a good vehicle for us to have investors who could be limited partners but wouldn't be involved in the day-to-day operation of the business. And so really just relying on those who have expertise in those areas about making sure you make wise decisions when you're setting up the structure. And obviously you do it, I never stopped being a lawyer, so there are going to be things that I would think about, liability, those kinds of things. What's the best structure for us to shield our personal selves from having liability? So those are the kind of things that we talked about with our professionals that we hired. And in terms of capital, one of the things that was really beneficial to us is that, like I told you, we bought the land in 1999. So we didn't actually start construction until, and really probably 2009, so almost a 10-year period. So obviously within that 10-year period, the real estate in this area continued to appreciate.
Yes.
So we were able to use our equity in the property as well, because we had accrued equity over the time that it took us to come up with our business plan, our feasibility study, all of the things that you need to have in place to get a bank to help you finance it. Obviously, since we were building, then it was a very large investment to get a building of this size on the ground. So
yeah, to be able to have equity in the property that you bought is amazing. That's something that maybe not a lot of people think about in terms of just the land, to
Right.
then erect a structure on top of it. So I think that's amazing how you see the difference between 99 to 2009 and how much that value has appreciated. And you had that foresight too.
Well, I think that, anybody who does development knows the main essential ingredient is location. Location, location, location. So if you know that an area is growing, expanding, transforming, changing, then it's just about timing and when you get in the market. It just so happened at the time that we purchased this land, there was so much planned for Midtown. They were developing it to be a livable, walkable community. And so there's a tax increment reinvestment zone in this area. There's a Midtown management district, and they help foster development. And so because we were more ideal for this area, they didn't want a big box hotel. There's not a big box hotel in Midtown. And so when we approached them about saying we wanted to do a bed and breakfast, then they were very welcoming of the idea because it could fit in with the community. It wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb. So
yeah, that makes sense. So what were some of the early wins that you remember, challenges, lessons learned?
Probably the earliest win was the equity. And I don't think either Sharon or I were thinking about it at the time. It's just that when we got down to really trying to get the financing in place, that we really understood that, we've got equity in the process property. Gosh, it's appreciated over time. We weren't focused on that. So that was a win, because anytime you are a startup business, trying to get capital is very, very challenging. And so obviously for a building this size, we were going to have to invest a lot of money. And as I used to always tell Sharon, well, we don't have to come up with it all out of our pockets. It's OPM. It's other people's money. And so that was a success. I think that was the first win. I think the challenges are then getting financing in place. That was very challenging. And it was challenging for a number of reasons. You have to think about the business that we were in. So we were in uncharted territory. There weren't a lot of other bed and breakfasts, none in Midtown. So nothing to compare to. So, typically when somebody's lending you money, they like to look and see, well, what are other similar businesses doing? What kind of, what do their financials look like? And we didn't have a lot of equivalent properties for them to compare to. So for some bankers, given what was going on in Midtown at the time, there were a lot of bankers that were like, well, maybe you should build some townhomes and flip them because that's what people are doing in Midtown. You've got a great location, get your money, get in and get out and move on. But we were like, nope. We want to do a bed and breakfast. This is so we didn't let people dictate what our vision was going to be or to try to change it to what they felt was right. And so that meant we talked to multiple banks. It was a while before we found one that would actually finance the project for us. And we were really fortunate to have a contractor who believed in the vision and had been working with us. And he brought the ultimate bank to the table that did the transaction for us because he really felt that strongly about it. And he was just willing to put his name behind it, not so much as an investor, but just as someone who encouraged a bank to take a serious look at the project.
Yes. So how much time would you say it took to get that bank?
It probably took maybe almost a year and a half, 2 years.
Okay, so yeah, quite some time.
So yeah, it took some time. I think the difference was we weren't in a hurry. There wasn't a deadline by which we had to have the business up and running. Because remember, Sharon was going to be retiring in a few years at the time. And so, it wasn't like, oh my goodness, we have to have the business up and open by X day. And so for others who don't have kind of the luxury to wait or to wait for the best deal, we were really blessed to be in a position to be able to wait for the appropriate banker to come in. And so that's what we did.
That's great. If someone else wants to enter the bed and breakfast business, what are some key aspects you think that they should consider before getting started?
I think the main thing that they have to consider is how hard they want to work. I think some people are enamored with, oh, it'd be nice to own a bed and breakfast because they like to cook. So then they think, oh, I can serve these fabulous breakfasts to people. But there's so much more than the breakfast. I mean, it really is a business. It really does require your attention, daily. And you have to like people, and you have to be willing to do all the work, because most bed and breakfasts, if you get a little larger, they probably are more classified as an inn or a small hotel. So they're going to have a lot more staff. But when you are truly a small bed and breakfast, you're only going to have a certain number of people to help you, because it's not going to generate the kind of income where you can have a staff of 20 people. You might need 20 people, but that means you have to wear a lot of hats, so that if the chef can't make it in to cook that day, you're the backup. If the person who helps you keep it clean doesn't come, you're making beds and cleaning toilets. So you have to be willing to do everything, because at the end of the day, it's a reflection of you if things aren't the way that you want them to be. So
yeah.
And I think a lot of people think it's not that much work, but once you get into it, then you're like, oh, it's a lot more work than I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I know that you wear a lot of hats, and Sharon wears a lot of hats. Kind of what does that look like? What kind of hats do you all wear? Is it kind of like wherever we're needed, we put our hands in? Do you have any specific roles?
We always joke that Sharon is maintenance and I'm IT. So if something breaks, I'm like, call Sharon. Mm-hmm. And she's like, if the computer's not working, call Genora. So that's one way we delineate. But really, at the end of the day, we both do whatever we need to do to make the business happen. Yes. On a day-to-day basis. And so whether that's changing hats multiple times a day because you have a guest that's late or is ill or needs some guidance, then, we just try to be there for our guests and, be present, in addition to just making sure when they get here that everything is in order and looks the way that they're expecting. So. Yes.
What role has faith played in good times, challenges, successes in your years in business?
Well, to me, faith is an integral part of who I am and who Sharon is. And I think that's one of the things when we first got started, and people used to ask us, like, how are you gonna do that? And she was just like, because I'm very calm, and, that's me right here. I just don't go up here. I don't get too excited. I don't get too down. And so she was just like, you have such a strong faith, but that's all I know. I only know to trust in God. So I learned very early in my life, and through the many projects that I had done, through my church out at Windsor, a lot of the development that I had done, that's where I learned and strengthened my faith, because I could see God in action, orchestrating, working things out, bringing the people that we needed when we needed them. So that's what I knew. So I just rested in that when we started the process for this business. I told Sharon, we're not going to worry about, the Lord will send the financing. He'll send the investors. And, that's just how it worked out for us. But it's just so much of who I am. I don't even think about it that way. It's just part of my DNA and my fibers to put my trust in God and to know that, because he already knows the plans. That's, so it's really, why should I be all worked up and stressed out and everything when I know that he knows the plans and he's going to make a way for it to happen just the way he planned.
Yes. And what's the best part about running a bed and breakfast?
I think the best part is the people that you meet. So we've had guests from all over the world. We've had some, very important people stay with us, some stars, some musicians. But it's just getting to know people from all walks of life and just being able to provide them with a little hospitality and making people feel special. That to me is, that's the best joy of being in the bed and breakfast business and being an innkeeper, is just that when you read a review that somebody's, you've impacted their life in some way, then that's the best reward.
And what does it take to have longevity in this business? You've had it over 10 years. Not so many people make it. How do you stick and stay?
Probably our faith. God has provided for us. I can tell you when the pandemic hit and you're looking at your reservation system and like, boop, 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 everything is just canceling. You're having a good year and all of a sudden it's like your screen goes blank because people are just canceling. And so that'll make you think about, will we survive this? What's our plan B? And I will tell you, we did have and do have a plan B and C. So while A was bed and breakfast, we always had in the back of our minds and talked about what are some other things we could do. Could we convert this into office space? Could we make this into like a little senior housing facility? I mean, there were other ideas that we had. And I can tell you during the initial times of the pandemic, we were like, do we need to fall back on plan B or C? But, the Lord provided for us. We got relief through our SBA lender and our bank. And so because there were 2 households involved, then we were able to sustain the business during those lean times. And what we did is rather than just waiting and doing nothing, we spent time modifying our website, updating our website. We did the things that we could control during that time. That downtime. We just thought of ways that we could change our business model and what we offered to customers because we knew the expectations would be different when people started to travel again. And so there was a lot to learn during that process. Just in the hotel industry, the entire industry was looking at how do we revamp, how do we retool, how do we make people feel safe when they start to travel again. So we just focused on that and, the Lord provided for us and we made it through.
Yes, that's awesome. And what would you tell somebody who has a vision, an idea, but they might be hesitant to step out there on faith and do it? What would you say to them today?
Well, I think the only thing that I can say is it starts with the first step. That's often the most challenging, is people come up with these great ideas for a business and they don't ever take the first step. Meaning they talk about it, they dream about it, but they don't take the first step to making it a reality. And so it's just like Jesus told Peter, get out of the boat, But if you don't get out of the boat to try to walk on water, you're never, the rest of the disciples stayed in the boat.
It's true.
But he got out of the boat.
He did.
And so to me, that's the same with any business, is you have to take that step. And then just be mindful that you need a plan. See, I think a lot of people have a vision, but they don't have a plan. And so it's really taking that first step. And a lot of times that is really to put the idea that you have in your head, the vision that you have in your mind, down on a piece of paper so that, the scripture says, write the vision, make it plain. And so I think that to me that's your first step.
Yeah, that's awesome. Ms. Boykins, we have covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would want to share with our listeners today?
No, just for people to, to not be afraid to get out of the boat, take the first step, and trust the vision that God gives you. Because I think if Sharon and I had listened to other people about what they thought was best for this location in Midtown, then, we wouldn't be here today. So
we wouldn't be here today. Well, thank you so much for being such a shining example of what it looks like to step out there, take the leap of faith, to you and Mrs. Owens. Where can people find you and find more about your bed and breakfast?
They can go online to our website, which is maisonmidtown.com. We do have some social media presence out there. Sharon and I don't manage it. Someone does that for us. So, but we do have an Instagram, Facebook. But yeah, and we're here most days. We try to come by. We try to be here so that we can greet our guests and make them feel warm and welcome and at home.
Awesome. Well, definitely make sure you check out La Maison in Houston when you're in H-Town. Make sure you come to visit all the events. You know, it's a booming city, so make sure you check it out. Well, I'm Michelle Lenae. This has been the Christ Over Culture podcast. You can find us on ChristOverCulture.com and anywhere where you get your podcast. Until next time, we'll see you soon.